They told us the Earth was solid rock, all the way to its core. They taught us in schools, drilled it into our heads, that nothing could survive deep beneath the Earth's surface. But what if I told you that everything they said was a lie? What if I told you that someone as brilliant as Elon Musk discovered a truth so terrifying that it had to be buried under layers of deception? A city, an entire civilization, hidden at the center of the Earth. I never believed in conspiracy theories until I found myself at the heart of one. My journey began with a simple curiosity, but it quickly spiraled into something much more sinister. Beneath our feet, there exists a world beyond imagination, and they've been hiding it from us. This is my story, and once you hear it, you'll never look at the world the same way again. It all started with an email, a simple message from an unknown address that slipped into my inbox on a quiet Monday morning. The subject line read, "Invitation to a groundbreaking discovery." At first I thought it was some kind of spam, the usual clickbait nonsense. But then I saw the sender's name, Elon Musk. I almost laughed out loud. Yeah, right, like one of the richest and busiest men on the planet would personally send me an email. But something about it seemed off. The more I looked at it, the more I couldn't shake the feeling that it might be real. The email was brief and direct. It mentioned a project Elon was working on, one that wasn't public knowledge. Apparently, he had stumbled upon something during one of his boring-sounding drilling experiments for SpaceX. He called it the most important discovery in human history and wanted to invite a few select individuals to witness it firsthand. I was skeptical, of course, but curiosity got the better of me. Who wouldn't want to meet Elon Musk, right? The meeting place was a remote facility tucked away in the mountains, completely off the grid. As strange as it sounded, I booked my flight. Worst case scenario, it would be a good story to tell my friends. But little did I know, I was walking into something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The drive to the facility was unnerving. As my car winded through the mountains, the signal on my phone faded into nothing. The towering trees on either side seemed to close in on me, like they were hiding something. When I finally arrived at the gated compound, there was no sign, no logo, just a security guard who wordlessly waved me in. The facility itself was a sleek, ultra-modern building, but it felt cold, sterile, like a place where secrets were buried, not revealed. As I stepped inside, I was greeted by a woman in a crisp suit who led me to a waiting room. There were others there too, a small group of people, each looking as confused and out of place as I felt. That's when Elon Musk walked in. He was exactly as you'd imagine him, calm, composed, with that slight smirk that made him look like he was always in on some cosmic joke. But there was a seriousness in his eyes that unnerved me. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice low but commanding. "What you're about to witness will change everything you thought you knew about the world." He gestured toward a massive screen at the front of the room. On it, a video began to play, grainy footage of what looked like a massive underground tunnel carved deep into the earth. "This," Elon said, pointing to the screen, "is the entrance to a city that exists beneath the surface of our planet." I felt a chill run down my spine. A city? Underground? It sounded ridiculous. But the footage continued, showing researchers in protective gear walking through the dark tunnel, their flashlights bouncing off the damp walls. The tunnel seemed to stretch on for miles until, finally, it opened up into a vast cavern, an entire city, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. "We've been told for centuries that nothing exists below the Earth's crust," Elon continued. "But that's not true. They lied to us. What we found down there, well, I'll let you see for yourself." He turned off the screen and motioned for us to follow him. My heart was racing. I didn't know whether to be excited or terrified. But one thing was certain. I needed to know more. The next part of the journey felt like something out of a sci-fi movie. We were led to an elevator, an industrial hulking thing that looked like it belonged in a mining operation. As the doors slid shut, I realized just how deep we were going. The descent was slow, the numbers ticking down on the control panel, taking us farther and farther below the surface. As we went deeper, the air grew colder, heavier. My ears popped, and I could feel the weight of the earth above us pressing down. The others in the elevator exchanged nervous glances, but no one said a word. After what felt like an eternity, the elevator stopped with a jolt. The doors slid open, revealing a narrow passageway lined with dim, flickering lights. The atmosphere down here was suffocating, like the air hadn't been touched by human lungs in centuries. "This way," Elon said, leading us through the tunnel. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of our footsteps echoing off the walls. Eventually, we came to a massive metal door. Elon pressed his hand against a scanner, and with a low hiss, the door slid open, revealing something that left us all speechless. It was the city. But it wasn't just a collection of buildings or ruins like I had imagined. No, this place was alive. The buildings were carved out of the rock itself, illuminated by a strange, glowing material that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. The structures were massive, towering over us, but there was something unsettling about them. They weren't built by human hands. The angles were too sharp, too perfect. And the symbols carved into the stone, they weren't in any language I recognized. "This," Elon said quietly, "is what they've been hiding from us." We stepped into the vast underground city, our footsteps echoing eerily across the stone streets. My mind was reeling from the sight. The structures were unlike anything I had ever seen. Massive spires reaching toward the ceiling of the cavern, connected by intricate bridges and pathways. Yet, despite the grandeur of the place, it felt wrong. There were no people, no signs of life. It was as if the entire city had been abandoned for centuries, frozen in time. The air was thick with dust, and an uneasy silence hung over everything. Elon walked ahead, leading us down the main street. As we moved deeper into the city, I noticed strange details that sent a chill down my spine. The carvings on the walls weren't just random symbols. They depicted creatures, beings with elongated limbs and hollow eyes, their faces twisted in expressions of pain and fear. "Who built this place?" I finally asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Elon paused, turning to face me. His expression was grim. "We don't know for sure. What we do know is that this city predates human civilization by thousands, if not millions of years." The weight of his words hung in the air. A city older than humanity itself? It seemed impossible, yet here we were, standing in the middle of it. "But if this place is so ancient," another member of our group asked, "why has no one ever discovered it before?" Elon's eyes darkened. "Because they didn't want us to." That cryptic statement sent a wave of unease through the group. Who were they? And why had they kept this place hidden from the world? I had a million questions, but the oppressive atmosphere of the city made it hard to think clearly. Something about this place felt off, like we weren't supposed to be here. As we ventured deeper, I noticed strange markings on the ground, circular patterns, almost like crop circles etched into the stone. They seemed to glow faintly, pulsing with the same eerie light that illuminated the rest of the city. "What are these?" I asked, pointing to the markings. Elon hesitated before answering. "We believe they're a form of communication, a language perhaps, or a warning." "A warning?" The word sent a shiver down my spine. "Warning of what?" Elon didn't respond. Instead, he motioned for us to follow him to a large structure at the center of the city, a towering building that looked like a temple. The door to the temple was massive, made of the same glowing stone as the rest of the city, but covered in intricate carvings that seemed to tell a story. As we stepped inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. The air was colder here, damp and heavy. The interior of the temple was even more unsettling than the outside. The walls were lined with statues, tall, twisted figures that looked almost human but not quite. Their faces were contorted into expressions of terror, their hands reaching out as if to ward off some unseen horror. At the far end of the room stood an altar, and on it was a massive stone tablet, covered in the same glowing symbols we had seen throughout the city. "This," Elon said, his voice barely above a whisper, "is what they've been hiding from us." We gathered around the stone tablet, our breath fogging in the cold air. Elon stepped forward, running his fingers over the glowing symbols. "These carvings tell the story of the city," he explained. "A story that has been buried for millennia." He turned to face us, his expression grim. This city wasn't just abandoned, it was sealed off. The beings who lived here weren't human, but they were intelligent, far more advanced than we can even comprehend. And they were running from something. "Running from what?" someone asked, their voice trembling. Elon hesitated before answering. "Something they referred to as the Devourer." A heavy silence fell over the group. "The Devourer?" I repeated, the word sounding foreign on my tongue. Elon nodded. "It's mentioned repeatedly in the carvings, something that came from the depths of the earth, something that consumed entire civilizations. The people of this city tried to stop it, but in the end they failed. They sealed the city to keep it contained, but what?" I pressed, my heart pounding in my chest. Elon's gaze locked onto mine. "But the seal is weakening." My blood ran cold at his words. The seal was weakening. That could only mean one thing. Whatever this Devourer was, it wasn't gone. It was still down here, lurking beneath the city, waiting to be unleashed. The others in the group exchanged nervous glances, and I could see the fear in their eyes. We were in way over our heads. "Why would you bring us here if it's so dangerous?" one of the others asked, their voice shaking. Elon's expression didn't waver. "Because the world needs to know the truth. For too long we've been lied to. The government, the scientists, everyone. They've all been hiding this from us. They knew about the Devourer, and they chose to keep it secret, to bury it. But I believe that humanity deserves to know what's really happening." I didn't know what to say. On one hand, he was right. If there was some ancient evil buried beneath the earth, we had a right to know. But on the other hand, what if exposing it was exactly what the Devourer wanted? As we stood there contemplating the implications of Elon's words, a low rumble shook the ground beneath our feet. It was subtle at first, barely noticeable, but it quickly grew stronger, the entire temple vibrating with the force of it. "What's happening?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. Elon's face was pale. "It's starting." Without another word, he turned and ran toward the entrance of the temple. The rest of us followed, stumbling over the uneven stone floor as the ground continued to shake beneath us. As we burst out into the open air of the city, I saw something that made my heart stop. The glowing patterns on the ground, the ones I had noticed earlier, were pulsing with a new intensity, the light growing brighter and brighter with each passing second. It was like the city itself was waking up, responding to something deep below. "We need to leave!" Elon shouted, his voice barely audible over the rumbling. "Now!" We ran. My legs were burning, my lungs screaming for air, but I didn't stop. None of us did. The city around us was coming to life in the worst possible way. The buildings trembled, cracks snaking up their sides as the ground beneath them shifted violently. But it wasn't just the city that was changing. The air itself felt different, heavier, like something was pressing down on us. And then I saw it. A dark shape moving beneath the surface of the stone streets. It was massive, too large to comprehend, and it was coming closer. "Run!" I screamed, my voice hoarse with fear. We barely made it to the elevator. The doors slammed shut just as the ground beneath us cracked open, revealing a gaping void that seemed to go on forever. The elevator jolted as it began to rise, and I could hear the distant roar of something far below, something that was awakening from a long, dark slumber. As we ascended back to the surface, my mind raced. Everything I thought I knew about the world had been shattered. There was more beneath the earth than we could ever imagine, and it wasn't friendly. We had barely escaped with our lives, but I knew deep down that this was far from over. The seal was weakening, and whatever was down there, it was coming. The others were silent, their faces pale and drawn. Elon stood at the front of the elevator, his expression unreadable. But I knew one thing for certain. He had known this was going to happen, and he had brought us here anyway. The truth was out there, but it was more terrifying than I could have ever imagined. As the elevator hummed its way back up, the weight of everything that had happened crushed my chest. We had narrowly escaped something ancient and terrible. My mind was racing, trying to process what Elon had revealed and what we had just witnessed below. No one spoke, not even Elon. The air inside the elevator was thick with tension, and the only sound was the soft whir of machinery and the distant rumbling of the earth below. I glanced around at the others. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide with fear. We were all thinking the same thing. What had we unleashed? Finally, I couldn't take the silence any longer. "Elon," I said, my voice strained. "What the hell was that down there?" Elon didn't turn around. He stared straight ahead, his shoulders tense. "That," he said quietly, "was the Devourer." "But what is it? And why didn't you tell us everything before we went down there?" I demanded, my fear quickly turning into anger. Elon sighed, finally turning to face us. "I told you what I could. If I had revealed everything, you wouldn't have come with me. And I needed all of you. You're witnesses to the truth now. The world needs to know what we've found." His words sent a chill down my spine. Witnesses? I didn't sign up to be a witness to the end of the world. "So what now?" I asked, my voice thick with apprehension. "If that thing is still down there and the seal is breaking, what do we do?" Elon's expression hardened. "We prepare. This is just the beginning. The Devourer will rise, and when it does, the world as we know it will change forever." The elevator finally reached the surface, and as the doors slid open, I felt the cool rush of air hit my face. But even as we stepped back into the real world, the sense of dread from below clung to me like a second skin. We had expected daylight, a return to normalcy, but the sky was darker than it should have been, the clouds thick and swirling in an unnatural pattern. A storm was coming, and it wasn't just the weather. Elon led us out of the facility in silence, and I could see the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. He had started something that none of us truly understood, and now there was no turning back. We piled into the vehicles waiting outside. The once exciting expedition had now become a desperate escape. As the driver started the engine, I couldn't help but glance back at the entrance to the underground facility. My stomach churned as I imagined the thing lurking beneath the surface, growing stronger with every passing moment. "We can't just leave it down there," I said, breaking the silence as we drove away. "What if it escapes?" Elon didn't answer right away. He stared out the window, lost in thought. Finally, he said, "It's already too late." The ride back to the city was tense. We drove through the countryside, the dark clouds swirling ominously overhead. The storm that had started underground seemed to have followed us above. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and lightning flashed across the sky, casting eerie shadows over the landscape. No one spoke for a long time, the weight of what we had discovered sitting heavy in the air. I kept glancing out the window, half expecting to see something emerge from the ground, some monstrous form rising from the depths to claim the earth. But the roads remained empty, and the only sounds were the distant crashes of thunder and the hum of the car's engine. Finally, one of the team members spoke up, breaking the silence. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We can't just go back to our normal lives after this. We've seen too much." Elon turned to face her, his expression grim. "You're right. Things won't go back to normal. The world is changing. The Devourer is waking up, and when it does, nothing will ever be the same." His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had known that things would change, but hearing it said aloud made it all too real. I glanced over at Elon. "You knew this would happen, didn't you? You knew we'd unleash something." Elon didn't deny it. "I suspected," he admitted, "but I had to know for sure. The world has been kept in the dark for too long. We've been lied to, manipulated. Now the truth is out, and it's up to us to decide what to do with it." By the time we reached the outskirts of the city, the storm had fully descended. The rain came down in sheets, hammering against the windows as the wind howled through the streets. The sky was an angry shade of gray, and lightning split the sky in rapid succession. It felt like the earth itself was reacting to what we had uncovered, as if the storm was tied to the dark power lurking below. We pulled up outside Elon's headquarters, a sleek, futuristic building that seemed out of place against the backdrop of the storm. Inside, the tension was palpable. The air felt heavy, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Elon led us to a secure room deep within the building, filled with screens and monitoring equipment. It was clear that he had been preparing for this moment for a long time, but even with all the technology at his disposal, I could see the fear in his eyes. "We need to find a way to stop it," I said, my voice firm. "If the seal is breaking, we have to fix it before it's too late." Elon shook his head. "The seal was never meant to last forever. The Devourer was always going to break free eventually. Our only hope now is to contain it." "Contain it? How?" I demanded. "That thing is ancient and it's only going to get stronger. What can we possibly do to stop it?" Elon didn't answer right away. He paced back and forth, his mind racing. Finally, he stopped and turned to face us. "There might be a way," he said, his voice low. "But it's risky, and it requires going back down there." The thought of returning to that underground city made my blood run cold. But I knew he was right. We couldn't just sit here and wait for the Devourer to rise. We had to do something. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. Whatever it takes. The decision was made. We would return to the underground city and try to contain the Devourer before it broke free. But this time we would be better prepared. Elon had access to advanced technology that he believed could help reinforce the seal and keep the ancient entity contained, at least long enough for us to find a permanent solution. As we suited up, the gravity of what we were about to do settled over me like a heavy weight. The storm outside had only intensified, the rain pounding against the windows like a warning. It was as if the world itself was trying to tell us to stop, to turn back before it was too late. But we couldn't. We had come too far, and the fate of the world rested on our shoulders. Elon led us back to the entrance of the underground facility, where we had first descended into the earth. The once exciting adventure now felt like a death march. My heart pounded in my chest as we entered the elevator and began the long descent back into the darkness. This time the ride felt even longer, the tension almost unbearable. No one spoke, the silence thick with fear and anticipation. We all knew what was waiting for us down there, and the thought of facing it again was enough to make my skin crawl. Finally, the elevator came to a stop, and the doors slid open to reveal the eerie glow of the underground city. The air was colder than before, and the rumbling beneath the surface had grown louder. The seal was weakening, and we didn't have much time. As we stepped out into the city, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The statues along the walls seemed to be staring at us with their hollow eyes, their twisted faces frozen in expressions of terror. And I couldn't help but wonder, were they once like us? Explorers who had ventured too far, only to be consumed by the darkness. Elon motioned for us to follow him toward the temple at the center of the city. As we approached, the ground beneath our feet trembled, and I could feel the presence of the Devourer growing stronger. The final battle was about to begin. The temple loomed before us, an ominous structure that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The closer we got, the heavier the air felt, like something was pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The tremors beneath our feet grew stronger with each step, and I could feel the earth shifting, as though the very ground was rebelling against us. Elon stopped just before the entrance, his face pale but determined. "This is it," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once we go inside, there's no turning back." I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. The fear was almost overwhelming, but I knew there was no other option. If we didn't act now, the Devourer would break free, and the world would never be the same. We entered the temple, the air growing colder as we stepped into the massive hall. The walls were covered in strange, ancient symbols, glowing faintly in the dim light. I couldn't read them, but I could feel their power, something ancient, something dangerous. At the center of the hall stood the seal. It was a massive stone slab, covered in intricate carvings and surrounded by glowing orbs of light. But it was cracked. Fissures ran through the stone, and the light from the orbs flickered, growing dimmer by the second. "The seal is almost broken," Elon said, his voice tight with urgency. "We don't have much time." He quickly set to work pulling out the equipment he had brought with him. It looked like some sort of advanced technology, a mix of science and something almost otherworldly. As he began setting up, I could feel the rumbling beneath my feet intensify. The ground was shaking violently now, and I knew that we were running out of time. Suddenly there was a deafening roar. The sound was so loud that it shook the walls of the temple, and I instinctively covered my ears. It was coming from below us, deep within the earth. The Devourer was waking up. "Keep it together," Elon shouted over the noise. "I just need a few more minutes." But the ground continued to shake, and I could see cracks forming in the floor. Something was coming, something massive. Then, with a sudden violent lurch, the floor beneath us gave way. I screamed as I fell, the world spinning around me as I plunged into the darkness below. I hit the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind out of me. Pain shot through my body, and for a moment I couldn't move. I lay there, gasping for air, trying to get my bearings. It was dark, pitch black, except for a faint glow coming from above. I looked up and saw the gaping hole where the floor had collapsed. I could hear the others above shouting, but their voices sounded distant, muffled by the ringing in my ears. I forced myself to sit up, wincing as I felt the pain in my side. My head was pounding and my vision was blurry, but I knew I had to move. I had fallen into some sort of cavern, deep beneath the temple. The air down here was thick, heavy with the smell of damp earth and something foul, something that made my skin crawl. I stood up, my legs shaky, and tried to get my bearings. The cavern was massive, stretching out in all directions. The walls were lined with more of the strange symbols, glowing faintly in the darkness. But there was something else down here too, something that moved in the shadows. I froze, my heart racing as I saw the shape of something large and serpentine slither across the far side of the cavern. It was massive, easily the size of a building, its scales glistening in the dim light. And then I saw its eyes, two glowing orbs of crimson, watching me from the darkness. The Devourer. It was real. All the legends, all the stories, they were true. And now it was awake. I took a step back, my mind racing. I had to get out of here. I had to warn the others. But before I could move, the ground beneath me trembled, and the Devourer let out another deafening roar. The sound was so loud it felt like my skull was about to crack. I clutched my head, falling to my knees as the earth shook beneath me. And then, out of the shadows, it came. The creature was massive, its long serpentine body coiled around the pillars of the cavern. Its scales were black as night, reflecting no light, and its eyes burned with a fierce, otherworldly glow. It moved with a terrifying grace, its body undulating through the air as it slithered toward me. I scrambled to my feet, my mind screaming at me to run, but my legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place as the creature closed in on me. Just as the Devourer was about to reach me, a blinding light filled the cavern. I threw up my arms, shielding my eyes from the intense brightness. The light was coming from above, from the temple, and I realized with a shock that it was Elon. He had activated the device. The light seemed to freeze the creature in its tracks. It hissed, recoiling from the brightness, and I could see the fury in its glowing eyes. It didn't like the light. It was hurting it. "Run!" I heard Elon shout from above. "Get to the elevator now!" I didn't need to be told twice. I turned and ran, my legs moving faster than I thought possible. The ground was still shaking, and I stumbled as the earth shifted beneath my feet. But I didn't stop. The creature let out another ear-piercing screech, and I could hear it moving behind me, slithering through the cavern in pursuit. But the light was slowing it down, keeping it at bay. I had a chance, if I could just make it to the elevator. I reached the edge of the cavern and saw a narrow tunnel leading back to the temple. I didn't hesitate. I plunged into the tunnel, the walls closing in around me as I ran for my life. The sound of the creature's hissing echoed through the tunnel, growing louder with each passing second. I could feel it behind me, the air growing colder as it drew closer. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but I couldn't stop. Not now. Finally, I saw the faint glow of light at the end of the tunnel, the entrance to the temple. I pushed myself harder, my heart pounding in my chest as I sprinted toward the light. I burst out of the tunnel, collapsing onto the floor of the temple. The others were there, waiting for me, their faces pale with fear. Elon rushed forward, pulling me to my feet. "We need to seal the entrance," he shouted, his voice frantic. "Now!" We barely had time to catch our breath before the ground shook violently once more. The Devourer was coming, closer and angrier than before. The roaring echoes grew louder, the tremors more violent, as if the creature's rage was manifesting in the earth itself. Elon worked quickly, setting up the device at the entrance to the tunnel. It was some sort of energy generator, designed to reinforce the seal that had already started to crumble. I watched in awe as he manipulated the controls, beams of light shooting out and converging on the fractured stone slab. The device hummed to life, the lights intensifying, bathing the entire temple in a bright, almost blinding glow. The cracks in the seal began to slow, but they didn't stop. The Devourer was still fighting to break free, its power growing stronger by the second. "We need more power!" Elon yelled over the noise, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's not enough!" I looked around frantically, trying to think of a solution. But the truth was, I didn't know how any of this worked. All I knew was that the creature was coming, and we were running out of time. Suddenly, a deafening crash shook the temple. The ground split open beneath us, and I saw the creature's massive form begin to emerge from the shadows, its crimson eyes glowing with rage. "No!" I screamed, my heart pounding in my chest. We were so close, but it was too late. The Devourer was here. Elon slammed his hand down on the controls, and the lights around us flared, growing impossibly bright. The ground shook violently, and I was thrown to the floor as the temple walls began to crumble. For a moment, everything went silent. The tremors stopped, the roaring ceased, and the light around us dimmed. I held my breath, waiting for the next explosion of violence, but it never came. The Devourer had disappeared. For a long moment, none of us moved. We just lay there on the cold stone floor, too stunned to speak. The air was still, the tremors had stopped, and the terrifying presence of the Devourer was gone. But something felt wrong. "Elon, did we stop it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer right away. He was staring at the device, the light still flickering faintly, his expression one of confusion. Finally, he shook his head, his voice barely audible. "I don't know." I stood up, my legs shaky as I looked around the ruined temple. The walls were cracked, chunks of stone littering the ground, and the once glowing symbols had dimmed. It was as if the energy of the place had been drained. For a moment it seemed like we had won, but the feeling of unease lingered. The Devourer was gone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The eerie silence that followed the disappearance of the Devourer weighed on all of us. The stillness didn't feel like victory. It felt like a calm before a storm, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. Elon stood by the control panel, his hands hovering over the dials, his eyes locked on the dimming lights. His confidence, once so unshakable, seemed to waver. "We should go," one of the scientists muttered behind me, their voice trembling. "If the creature's gone, we need to get back to the surface." But I knew, deep in my gut, that something was wrong. The air was too still, too thick. The faint rumbling beneath my feet hadn't vanished completely. It had just shifted. "Elon," I whispered, stepping closer to him. "Are we safe?" He looked up at me, his eyes shadowed with uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice soft. "The seal, it's not fully repaired. The Devourer might be gone, but I can't tell where." The others began murmuring, their fear palpable. I turned to them, trying to keep calm. "We can't panic. We need a plan. If the creature is still somewhere in the earth, we have to figure out how to contain it." "But what if it's already escaped?" A voice shot back, filled with dread. "What if it's out there, waiting for the right moment?" The suggestion sent a chill down my spine, but I couldn't let myself get lost in the fear. "We've made it this far," I said, louder now, trying to steady my own nerves as much as theirs. "We have to stay focused. There has to be a way to track it, to know where it went." Elon stepped forward, his expression grim but determined. "There might be a way," he said. "The ancient texts mention a second seal, deeper within the earth. If the Devourer slipped through the cracks here, it might be heading there." The second seal? Another layer of defense that none of us had been prepared for. The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. "How far?" I asked, bracing myself for the answer. He hesitated. "Far enough that we won't have much time. The deeper we go, the more unstable the earth becomes." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Descending deeper into the unknown, chasing after a creature that could destroy us all, it was madness. But what choice did we have? If the Devourer reached the second seal, it could shatter the very fabric of the Earth's core. "Then we go," I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle in my bones. "We find this second seal and stop it, for good this time." The decision to continue deeper into the Earth wasn't one made lightly. As we gathered our equipment and prepared for the next leg of the journey, the weight of what we were about to face settled over the team like a dark cloud. The air down here was growing colder by the minute, the temperature dropping the further we descended. I could feel the tension in every step we took. The walls of the temple felt alive, as though they were breathing with us, each stone murmuring secrets we weren't meant to know. Elon led the way, his flashlight casting long shadows on the cracked stone as we moved forward, deeper into the heart of the earth. No one spoke, the silence only broken by the occasional drip of water from the ceiling and the distant rumble of shifting rock beneath us. Every sound felt amplified, our footsteps echoing in the hollow chamber. The tunnel we entered was narrow, the ceiling barely high enough for us to stand upright. As we walked, I found myself touching the walls, feeling the cool, rough texture of the ancient stone. The strange symbols that lined the walls had become more prominent, glowing faintly as we passed, their meaning lost to time but their power unmistakable. "Is this the path to the second seal?" I asked, keeping my voice low. My words seemed to hang in the air, carried by the strange energy of the tunnel. Elon nodded without turning back. "According to the readings, yes, we should be getting closer." The deeper we went, the more the air began to change. It grew heavier, thick with a strange metallic tang that made it difficult to breathe. I could feel the pressure building in my chest, like the earth itself was closing in on us. "What's causing this?" one of the scientists asked, panting as he struggled to keep up. "It's the Earth's core," Elon explained, his voice strained. "We're descending into areas where the natural pressure is immense, but the seal should hold back most of it, if it's still intact." That "if" was a heavy one. The very thought that the second seal might already be compromised sent a surge of dread through me. But I pushed it down. We had to keep moving. After what felt like hours, we finally emerged into a massive chamber. The air here was stifling, hot and thick, as though we had stepped into the furnace of the earth itself. In the center of the chamber stood the second seal, or what was left of it. The stone was cracked, much like the first, but the damage here was worse. Deep fissures ran through the stone, and strange, dark energy pulsed from the cracks like a heartbeat. The glowing symbols surrounding the seal were dim, flickering in and out like a dying flame. "We're too late," Elon whispered, his voice hollow. The Devourer had already been here. For a moment, no one moved. We stood in silence, staring at the cracked seal, the weight of our failure pressing down on us. The Devourer had slipped past the first seal and made its way here, to the heart of the earth. And now, the second seal was crumbling. If it broke completely, the creature would be free to unleash its full power. "We have to fix it," I said, my voice barely steady. "We can still stop it." Elon shook his head. "The damage is too severe. I don't know if we can repair it in time." "Then we buy ourselves time," I said, feeling a surge of desperation. "We keep the Devourer from reaching the core. There has to be a way." One of the scientists stepped forward, his hands shaking as he pointed to the equipment we had brought with us. "We could try reinforcing the seal with the tech we used earlier, but it's a long shot. It might not hold." "We don't have any other options," I said. "We have to try." Elon nodded, though the doubt in his eyes was clear. He began setting up the equipment, his movements quick and precise. The rest of us spread out, keeping a watchful eye on the cracks in the seal. The air was growing hotter, the pressure more intense. as though the earth itself was about to collapse in on us. Suddenly, the ground beneath us trembled. It wasn't like the tremors from before. This was different, more deliberate. The Devourer was near. I could feel it in my bones, a cold, creeping fear that slithered up my spine. "We need to move faster," I shouted, my heart racing. "It's coming!" Elon worked frantically, the lights on the device flickering as he adjusted the settings. The chamber shook again, more violently this time, and I could hear the distant roar of the Devourer echoing through the tunnel behind us. And then, out of the shadows, it appeared. The Devourer was larger than I had ever imagined. Its serpentine body coiled around the pillars of the chamber, its dark scales shimmering in the dim light. Its eyes burned with an ancient fury, and its jaws opened wide, revealing rows of jagged, razor-sharp teeth. "It's here," I whispered, my heart pounding in my chest. The Devourer let out a deafening roar, and the ground beneath us split open. The seal was breaking, and the creature was about to tear through it. Time slowed as the Devourer lunged forward, its massive body crashing toward us with a speed and ferocity that took my breath away. The ground beneath our feet was crumbling, the air thick with dust and debris as the chamber shook with the force of the creature's power. "Get back!" Elon shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. I barely had time to react as the creature's jaws snapped at the space where I had been standing just moments before. I dove to the side, rolling across the stone floor as the Devourer's tail whipped through the air, smashing into one of the pillars and sending chunks of stone crashing down around us. "Elon!" I screamed, scrambling to my feet. "Is it ready?" "Almost!" he shouted back, his hands flying over the controls of the device. "Just a few more seconds!" But we didn't have a few more seconds. The Devourer was relentless, its massive form coiling and twisting through the chamber as it lashed out at us. Its eyes burned with a terrifying intelligence, as though it knew exactly what we were trying to do, and it was determined to stop us. The ground beneath us shook violently, and I could see the cracks in the seal growing wider, the dark energy pulsing from within like a heartbeat. If we didn't stop the creature soon, the seal would shatter completely, and the Devourer would be free to unleash its full power on the world above. "I can't hold it off much longer," I shouted, my voice hoarse from the dust and smoke that filled the air. Elon didn't respond, his focus entirely on the device in front of him. I could see the sweat dripping down his face, his hands shaking as he adjusted the settings. "Come on," I muttered under my breath, watching as the Devourer reared back for another attack. "Come on!" And then, with a sudden blinding flash of light, the device activated. A pulse of energy shot out from the machine, spreading across the chamber like a wave. The Devourer let out a deafening roar, its body convulsing as the energy washed over it. For a moment, I thought it had worked. The creature writhed in pain, its massive form collapsing to the ground as the energy continued to pulse through the chamber. But then, with a final earth-shattering roar, the Devourer surged forward, its jaws snapping open as it lunged toward the seal. "Elon, now!" I screamed, my voice breaking with desperation. With a final push, Elon slammed his hand down on the control panel, and the device sent out one last pulse of energy. The light filled the chamber, blinding and all-consuming as the ground beneath us cracked open. And then, everything went dark.